We couldn't be happier. We couldn't be more certain. This is the happiest day of my life.
3 days after saying those words, she was dead, by choice. Here's a question that should keep you awake at night. What would it take for you to willingly end your life? Not in desperation, not in mental illness, but calmly, happily, convinced you were making the most rational decision of your existence. What belief would have to take root in your mind? What community would you have to join? What leader would you have to trust? And here's the truly terrifying part. Would you even recognize it happening? March 26, 1997. While millions of Americans gazed up at the Hale-Bopp comet streaking across the night sky, inside a luxurious mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, California, 39 people lay dead. They weren't victims of violence. They weren't casualties of disease. They had orchestrated their own deaths with chilling precision, convinced they were leaving Earth behind to board a spacecraft hidden in the comet's tail. This is the story of Heaven's Gate, one of the most infamous cults in American history. But this isn't just a story about a mass suicide. It's a story about belief, belonging, and how ordinary people can be led to extraordinary acts. It's a story that asks uncomfortable questions. How did intelligent, educated individuals come to believe they needed to exit their vehicles, their human bodies, to reach salvation? And perhaps most disturbing of all, could it happen again? Let's into the journey step by step. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Rancho Santa Fe is one of the wealthiest communities in America. Nestled in the rolling hills of San Diego County, it's home to tech executives, celebrities, and entrepreneurs. The median home price? Over $2 million. It's the last place you'd expect to find a doomsday cult. On March 26, 1997, a former member of Heaven's Gate received a disturbing package. Inside was a videotape and a letter with explicit instructions. Wait a day, then call the authorities. The letter suggested something terrible had happened at the mansion on Colina Norte. When San Diego County Sheriff's deputies entered the 9,200-square-foot mansion that afternoon, they encountered a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The air was thick and oppressive, and then they saw them, bodies, arranged on beds and bunk beds throughout the sprawling house. 39 people, ranging in age from 26 to 72, all dressed identically in black shirts, black sweatpants, and brand new Nike Decades sneakers. Purple shrouds covered their faces and upper bodies. Each person had a $5 bill and some quarters in their pockets. Fare for the journey, investigators would later learn. Deputy Sheriff Robert Brunk, one of the first responders, later said, "I'd been a cop for 20 years. I'd seen car accidents, murders, terrible things. But nothing prepared me for this. It was so organized, so peaceful. Like they'd all just decided to go to sleep at the same time. But this was no ordinary death. This was the culmination of a 22-year journey, a journey that began with 2 charismatic leaders and a promise of salvation among the stars." Chapter 2. The Beginning. Bonnie and Marshall. To understand Heaven's Gate, we need to go back to 1972, to a chance meeting between 2 unlikely prophets in a Houston hospital. Marshall Herff. Applewhite was a music professor. Born in Texas in 1931, he had a conventional life, married with 2 children, a respected career teaching music at the University of St. Thomas. He was known for his beautiful voice and his passion for opera. He directed the Houston Grand Opera's chorus. He was, by all accounts, successful. But Marshall had a secret. He was gay, living in an era and place where that was not accepted. His marriage fell apart. He lost his job amid rumors of an inappropriate relationship with a male student. By his early 40s, Marshall was struggling with his identity, his sexuality, and a profound sense of purposelessness. He checked himself into a psychiatric hospital, claiming he was hearing voices and experiencing visions. Enter Bonnie Lou Trousdale Nettles, a nurse at the hospital where Marshall was being treated. Bonnie was 44 years old, married with 4 children. But she had spiritual yearnings that her conventional life couldn't satisfy. She was fascinated by astrology, theosophy, and the occult. She believed in channeling, reincarnation, and UFOs. When Bonnie met Marshall, something clicked. They both felt they'd known each other before, in past lives. They began spending hours together, discussing spirituality, aliens, and the purpose of human existence. Bonnie told Marshall she believed they had a divine mission together. In 1973, they left their families behind and set out on a spiritual journey across America. They traveled in Bonnie's car, sleeping in campgrounds, staying in cheap motels. They were searching for something: truth, purpose, a sign from the universe. They called themselves the Two. Bonnie became Ty after the musical note, and Marshall became Do, also after a musical note. They believed they were the two witnesses mentioned in the book of Revelation, extraterrestrial beings who had taken human form to deliver a final message to humanity. Their message? Earth was about to be recycled, wiped clean, and started over. But there was hope. A select group of humans could evolve to the next level, a physical, tangible existence beyond Earth, among the stars. To get there, they needed to shed everything human: possessions, relationships, sexuality, even their human identities. It sounds absurd now, but in the mid-1970s, America was different. The counterculture movement was in full swing. People were experimenting with consciousness, questioning mainstream society, exploring alternative spiritualities. UFO sightings were common. The idea that we weren't alone in the universe seemed not just possible, but probable, and T and Do were convincing. Marshall had the voice of an opera singer and the presence of a professor. He could speak for hours, weaving together biblical prophecy, science fiction, and New Age spirituality into a compelling narrative. Bonnie provided the spiritual foundation, claiming to channel messages from higher beings. Chapter 3. The First Followers. In 1975, Ty and Do held their first public meeting in Los Angeles. They rented a small hall and advertised with flyers: UFOs, why they are here, who they have come for. 20 people showed up. By the end of the evening, several were convinced they'd found their purpose. Word spread. They held more meetings, in Oregon, in Colorado, across the West Coast. And people came. Not dozens, but hundreds. By September 1975, they had attracted enough attention to make national news. The media dubbed them the UFO cult and Bo and Peep. They'd briefly used those names. A meeting in Waldport, Oregon, drew over 200 people. 30 of them left their lives behind on the spot to follow T and Do. Who were these followers? Contrary to popular belief, they weren't all vulnerable, uneducated, or mentally ill. Many were college-educated professionals. There were teachers, nurses, artists, and computer programmers. Some came from stable, loving families. Others were searching for meaning after personal tragedies or life transitions. Visual, interview clips, or photos of former members who left early. What made them susceptible? Psychologists who studied the group later identified several factors. First, timing. Many joined during transitional periods: divorce, career change, loss of a loved one. They were searching for new direction. Second, the promise of something greater. Ty and Do offered a clear answer to life's biggest questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Is there more to existence? Third, community. The group provided instant belonging, purpose, and family. In a society where many felt isolated, this was powerful. Fourth, gradual commitment. No one was asked to commit fully right away. It started with attending a meeting, then a camping trip, then maybe a few weeks traveling. By the time members were asked to give up everything, they were already deeply invested. For the next few years, the group lived nomadically, camping across America. They called themselves the Crew. They developed strict rules: no sex, no drugs or alcohol, minimal contact with humans, what they called people outside the group. They meditated, studied Ty and Do's teachings, and waited for the spaceship they believed would come to collect them. Members gave up their names, taking new celestial-themed identities ending in Odie, as in body, their earthly vessels. They cut ties with their families. They donated all their money to the group. They dedicated themselves completely to achieving the next level. Chapter 4. The Wilderness. Years between 1975 and 1985, Heaven's Gate essentially disappeared from public view. They moved constantly, living in tents and RVs, scraping by on odd jobs and members' savings. It was a period of intense indoctrination and isolation. Tai and Do refined their theology during this time. They taught that Earth was merely a garden where souls could be planted and cultivated. The next level, their heaven, was a real physical place where beings lived in enhanced bodies, free from human limitations. These beings occasionally came to Earth, taking human form to offer evolution to worthy souls. According to their beliefs, Jesus was a next-level being who had come to Earth 2,000 years ago with the same mission. His followers were harvested, taken to the next level. Now, Tai and Do were the next representatives, and their followers were the next harvest. But there was a catch. To reach the next level, followers had to completely overcome their humanness. This meant no sex or romantic relationships. Human reproduction was of the animal kingdom, beneath the next level. No individual identity. They were to think of themselves as a collective, working toward a common goal. No attachment to human things. Family, career, possessions, these were chains holding them to Earth. Complete obedience. Tai and Do were the only connection to the next level. Questioning them was questioning salvation itself. The group developed their own vocabulary. Earth was a planet in its final days. Their human bodies were vehicles or containers they temporarily occupied. Death was exiting the vehicle. Regular humans were plants, not yet awakened. Members were students in a school where Tai and Do were the teachers. They wore uniforms, identical clothing that minimized gender differences and individual expression. They kept their hair short. Men and women looked increasingly similar. This was intentional. The next level, they believed, had no gender. Former members who left during these years describe a regimented, austere existence. Days were structured with tasks, study, and meditation. Free time barely existed. Entertainment was minimal. Occasionally they'd watch Star Trek, which they believed contained hidden truths about the next level, or science fiction films. Members were partnered with check partners, companions who monitored each other for human behavior, like expressing too much emotion, nostalgia for their old lives, or attraction to others. If someone was struggling with humanness, the group would gather to help them work through it. It was, in many ways, a total institution, like a monastery, military boot camp, and commune combined. The outside world faded away. The group became their entire reality. Chapter 5. The Loss of Tai. In 1983, Bonnie Nettles, Tai, was diagnosed with liver cancer. For a group that believed their leaders were advanced extraterrestrial beings in human form, this was a crisis. If Tai was from the next level, why was she dying like a human? Tai and Do had taught that they would never die, that a spacecraft would physically pick them up, along with their followers, taking everyone to the next level together. Tai's illness challenged this fundamental belief. Visual recreation of this period. Do explained it to the group this way. Tai's vehicle was wearing out, but she wasn't really dying. She would exit her vehicle and move to the next level ahead of them, preparing for their arrival. Her death was part of the plan. In June 1985, Tai died at age 57. For Do, this was devastating. Tai had been his partner, co-leader, and according to their beliefs, his spiritual companion across multiple lifetimes. Now he was alone, but Tai's death also transformed Do's leadership. While both had been charismatic, T had been the spiritual anchor, the one who channeled messages and received visions. With her gone, Do became the sole authority. There was no one to check his interpretations, no partner to discuss decisions with. Over the next few years, Do's teachings evolved. He became more convinced that time was running out. The harvest was coming soon. The group needed to prepare more intensely. Chapter 6. Going public. In the early 1990s, Heaven's Gate made a crucial decision. They would stop hiding and take their message public. And they chose a revolutionary new tool to do it, the Internet. The group had survived by pooling resources and working. Many members were skilled in computers, web design, and digital services. They formed a company called Higher Source, offering web design services to businesses. They were good at it too. Professional, reliable, reasonably priced. Their clients had no idea they were hiring a UFO cult. In 1996, they launched their website, heavensgate.com. It was sophisticated for its time, multiple pages of writings, philosophy, even videos. They posted their complete theology, recruitment materials, and updates. The site still exists today, maintained by two former members, frozen in its 1990s design, like a digital time capsule. The group also produced a series of videos called Beyond Human. In these recordings, members spoke directly to the camera, explaining why they joined, what they believed, and why they were willing to leave Earth. These videos are chilling to watch now, knowing what was coming. In the videos, members seem articulate, intelligent, and sincere. They speak calmly about leaving their bodies behind. They express no doubt. One member says, "I couldn't be happier. I couldn't be more certain." Another, "I've never felt more alive." But beneath the surface, pressure was building. Dew was becoming increasingly convinced that the window for reaching the next level was closing. He was in his 60s, dealing with health problems. The group had been waiting for over 20 years. When would the spacecraft come? Chapter 7. The Hale-Bopp Comet. In July 1995, two amateur astronomers independently discovered a comet. It would become one of the brightest comets of the 20th century, Hale-Bopp. Visible to the naked eye for a record 18 months, it captivated millions of skywatchers as it approached Earth through 1996 and early 1997. For Heaven's Gate, Hale-Bopp was a sign. In November 1996, a guest on the popular late-night radio show, Coast to Coast AM, claimed that a Saturn-like object was following Hale-Bopp. The claim was quickly debunked. It was a mistake, a processing error in an amateur photograph. But the rumors spread across the early internet like wildfire. For Dew and his followers, this was it, the sign they'd been waiting for. The spacecraft, hidden behind the comet, was coming to take them to the next level. The group's final months became increasingly focused. In January 1997, they recorded their final video messages. Between January and March, all 39 members, and Dew himself, recorded statements explaining their decision to exit their vehicles. These farewell videos are difficult to watch. Members are clearly committed, speaking without apparent coercion. They say goodbye to their families, though not by name. They explain that they're not committing suicide. They see it as graduating, as leaving behind a limited existence for something infinitely better. One woman says, "We're looking at it as a very joyful, anticipated transition. We couldn't be happier." A man states, "I've been a member for 22 years. This is the happiest moment of my life." Dew himself appears in several videos, looking tired and unwell, but resolute. He says, "This is the last chance. The planet is about to be recycled, spaded under. We're about to return to the next level, the evolutionary kingdom of heaven." In March, the group moved into the mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, renting it for $10,000 a month. They told the landlord they were a group of Christian computer consultants. They paid several months in advance. Inside, they made their preparations. They researched methods. They practiced, doing everything except the final act. They wanted to ensure everyone would succeed, that no one would survive and be left behind. Chapter 8. The Final Days. The last days of March 1997 played out with ritualistic precision. The group divided into 3 waves, spread over 3 days. On March 24th, the first 15 members laid down on their beds in bunks. They ingested phenobarbital mixed with applesauce or pudding, washed it down with vodka. They placed plastic bags over their heads, secured with rubber bands to ensure death. The remaining members placed purple shrouds over their dead companions' faces and torsos. They cleaned up meticulously. Then the second wave prepared to follow. On March 25th, 15 more members went through the same process, assisted by the survivors. On March 26th, the final 9, including Dew himself, completed the ritual. But who placed the shrouds on the last few? Who helped Dew? These questions remain unanswered, though investigators believe the final 2 or 3 members shrouded themselves as best they could before dying. Each person was dressed identically: black shirt, black pants, black and white Nike Decades. Armband patches on their left shoulders read, "Heaven's Gate Away Team," a reference to Star Trek landing parties. In their pockets, a $5 bill and 3 quarters. Packed bags sat beside their bodies, as if they were going on a trip. The house was immaculate. There was no struggle, no mess beyond what was necessary. They'd left detailed instructions for anyone who found them. They'd paid their bills in advance. They'd even sent package with videotapes and materials to former members and media outlets, timed to arrive after their deaths. When deputies arrived on March 26th, they found what investigators later called the most organized mass death they'd ever seen. It was peaceful, quiet, and absolutely horrifying. The aftermath. The Heaven's Gate mass suicide became an instant media sensation. For days, it was the only story that mattered. News helicopters circled the mansion. Reporters crowded the streets of Rancho Santa Fe. The images, purple shrouds, Nike sneakers, a quiet mansion of death, were seared into public consciousness. America was shocked, horrified, and confused. How could this happen? Who were these people? And the question everyone asked, why? For the families of the members, the aftermath was devastating. Many hadn't heard from their loved ones in years, decades even. Some had tried interventions, hired deprogrammers, pleaded with their children or siblings or parents to come home. Now it was too late. In interviews after the deaths, family members struggled to understand. He was smart, one sister said of her brother. He graduated college. He had a good job. How did this happen? A mother said, I lost my daughter 20 years ago when she joined them, but I always thought, I hoped, that maybe one day she'd come back. Now I know she never will. Investigators and psychologists studied the group extensively. What they found complicated the simple narrative of crazy cult members. Many Heaven's Gate members had been thoughtful, intelligent people who truly believed they were making a rational choice. They weren't brainwashed in the Hollywood sense, mind-controlled zombies following orders. They were convinced believers who'd gradually, over years, constructed a reality where leaving Earth made perfect sense. Dr. Robert Balch, a sociologist who studied Heaven's Gate for decades, explained, they didn't think they were committing suicide. They thought they were transitioning to a higher form of existence. In their worldview, staying on Earth would have been the irrational choice. This is what makes Heaven's Gate so troubling. These weren't stupid people tricked by an obvious con. They were ordinary people who, through a long process of social influence, identity transformation, and incremental commitment, came to hold extraordinary beliefs. The survivors. 2 members of Heaven's Gate survived, not because they were lucky, but because they were unlucky. They'd been asked to stay behind. Rio D'Angelo and Chuck Humphrey were longtime members, committed to the group's beliefs, but Dew chose them to remain on Earth, to handle the aftermath, to keep the website running, to ensure the message continued. For these 2 men, being left behind was torture. They'd wanted to go to the next level with everyone else. Instead, they had to deal with the media circus, the police investigations, the public scrutiny. In the years after, both men struggled. Rio experienced survivor's guilt and depression. He attempted suicide in 1998, but survived. He later said he felt he'd failed a test, that he wasn't worthy of the next level. Today, the 2 surviving members maintain the Heaven's Gate website, unchanged since 1997. They still believe in Dew's teachings, though they live normal lives on Earth. They're waiting for another chance, another opportunity to reach the next level. There are other survivors, too, people who left Heaven's Gate before the end. Some left in the 1970s, others in the 80s or 90s. Their stories vary widely. Some are angry, feeling they were manipulated and lost years of their lives. Others speak positively about their time in the group, saying they learned valuable lessons even if they no longer believe the theology. A few still think Dew and Ty were special, even if they're not sure about the next level. What's clear is that leaving a total institution like Heaven's Gate was profoundly difficult. Members had to rebuild identities, reconnect with families, find jobs, and navigate a world that had moved on without them. Many struggled with depression, addiction, and PTSD-like symptoms. More than 25 years have passed since the Heaven's Gate mass suicide. The mansion in Rancho Santa Fe still stands. Though it's changed hands several times, no easy sale given its history. The Nike decades, the model of shoe the members wore, became a dark cultural reference. The purple shrouds, the bunk beds, the peaceful faces. These images remain iconic representations of cult tragedy. But what did we learn from Heaven's Gate? And perhaps more importantly, could it happen again? The answer is absolutely. The factors that created Heaven's Gate haven't disappeared. In fact, some have intensified. We live in an age of increasing social isolation. More people report feeling lonely, disconnected, without purpose. The communities that once provided meaning, churches, civic organizations, extended families, have weakened for many people. We live in an age of information overload and competing realities. The internet has democratized information, but also misinformation. QAnon, flat earthers, various conspiracy communities. These show how groups can construct alternative realities, reinforced by online echo chambers. We live in an age of existential anxiety. Climate change, political polarization, economic instability, rapid technological change. Many people feel we're heading towards some kind of reckoning. The apocalyptic thinking that drove Heaven's Gate isn't unique to them. Psychologists who study destructive groups see concerning parallels today. NXIVM, which operated until 2018, used similar techniques of gradual commitment and identity reconstruction. QAnon, while not a traditional cult, exhibits many cult-like characteristics: charismatic leadership, even if anonymous, apocalyptic beliefs, us versus them thinking, and resistance to contradictory evidence. The internet, which Heaven's Gate was an early adopter of, has made it easier than ever to find like-minded believers and harder than ever to encounter opposing viewpoints. Algorithms feed us content that confirms what we already believe. Online communities can become intensely insular. So how do we protect ourselves and our loved ones? Experts suggest watching for these warning signs: gradual isolation. Any group that encourages cutting ties with family, friends, or outside information sources should raise red flags. Absolute certainty. Healthy belief systems allow for doubt, questions, and growth. Dangerous ones demand complete certainty and punish questioning. Charismatic leadership with no accountability. When one person or a small group holds absolute authority with no checks or oversight, abuse becomes likely. Us versus them thinking. Dividing the world into enlightened insiders and ignorant outsiders is a warning sign. Moving goalpost. When predictions fail but the group explains them away rather than reconsidering core beliefs, that's concerning. Incremental commitment. Groups that gradually escalate demands, first asking for time, then money, then complete life restructuring, are using a proven manipulation technique. The human cost. It's easy to focus on the strange beliefs, the matching outfits, the bizarre theology. But let's not forget, 39 people died, 39 individuals with histories, families, dreams. There was Thomas Nichols, a 58-year-old former drug counselor. His brother said Tom was the most intelligent, caring person I knew. He'd been searching for spiritual meaning his entire life. There was Denise Thurman, 44 years old. She'd been a talented artist before joining. Her family said she'd always been idealistic, always looking for a cause greater than herself. There was David Van Sinderen, 48, from a wealthy East Coast family. He'd attended elite schools but felt hollow inside, searching for authentic purpose. The youngest was 26-year-old David Moore. The oldest was 72-year-old Darwin Lee Johnson. Each had a story. Each made a choice, though understanding that choice requires understanding the years of gradual influence, the community bonds, the worldview that made it seem reasonable. Some members had been with the group for over 20 years. They'd spent more of their adult lives in Heaven's Gate than out of it. The group was their family, their identity, their entire world, and each left behind grieving families. Parents who outlived their children, siblings who'd lost brothers and sisters, children who grew up without parents. These families carry unique grief, not just loss, but confusion, anger, sometimes guilt. What could they have done differently? How did they miss the signs? Why couldn't they reach their loved one? There's also complicated stigma. Society often judges the families of cult members. How could you let this happen? People ask, as if loving someone in a destructive group is simple to navigate. Some families never recovered. The pain was too deep, too complicated. Others found strength in connecting with each other, forming support groups for families affected by destructive cults. What they want people to understand is this: their loved ones weren't crazy. They weren't stupid. They were human beings who, in searching for meaning and community, found themselves in a group that gradually led them to an unthinkable act. The uncomfortable questions. Heaven's Gate forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about belief, reality, and freedom. Question 1. What is a cult? The word cult is loaded, often used to dismiss beliefs we find strange. But scholars struggle to define where legitimate religious movements end and dangerous cults begin. Is it about belief content, control tactics, outcomes? Many mainstream religions started as small groups with charismatic leaders and beliefs that seemed crazy to outsiders. Christianity began this way. Islam began this way. At what point does a new religious movement become a cult? Heaven's Gate used intense social control, isolation, and absolute obedience, clear warning signs, but they also didn't physically imprison anyone. Members could leave, and some did. Was this freedom genuine, or was the psychological control so complete that physical barriers weren't needed? Question 2. Where is the line between faith and delusion? Billions of people believe in religious ideas that can't be scientifically proven. Afterlives, souls, divine beings. Heaven's Gate believed in the next level, a physical paradise among the stars. Is that fundamentally different from believing in heaven? Many would say yes. The difference is that Heaven's Gate's beliefs led to death. But many religious traditions have martyrdom traditions, valorizing dying for faith. Where's the line? This isn't to equate Heaven's Gate with mainstream religions, but to highlight the difficulty of defining irrational belief in a world where most people hold unprovable convictions about ultimate reality. Question 3. Can we ever truly know our beliefs are our own? All of us are influenced by our environments, cultures, families, and communities. None of us forms beliefs in a vacuum. So, when does influence become manipulation? When does persuasion become mind control? Heaven's Gate members underwent years of identity reconstruction. But isn't all socialization a form of identity construction? We're shaped by schools, media, peer groups, and cultures. The difference is degree, not kind. This doesn't excuse Heaven's Gate's manipulation tactics, but it should make us think carefully about how we form our own beliefs and how much agency we really have. Question 4. Should we respect destructive beliefs? We value religious freedom and pluralism. But what about beliefs that lead to harm? Society intervenes in many cases. We have child abuse laws that override religious claims, for example. Should authorities have intervened in Heaven's Gate? Could they have? The group broke no laws until the final act. Members were adults making what they claimed were informed choices. This raises difficult questions about paternalism and freedom. How much can a democratic society protect people from their own choices without becoming authoritarian? Lessons for today. So, what can we learn from Heaven's Gate that's relevant today? Lesson 1. Community is powerful. Choose wisely. Human beings need belonging. We're tribal creatures who crave connection. Heaven's Gate provided deep community, purpose, and family. That's not inherently bad. It's what we need as humans. The lesson isn't to avoid community, but to choose communities that enhance rather than diminish us. Healthy communities encourage outside relationships, allow dissent, promote individual growth, and have accountability structures. Lesson 2. Gradual change is invisible while happening. No one joins a cult planning to die. Members don't wake up one day deciding to drink poison. It's incremental. Each step seems small, reasonable, justified by what came before. This happens in many contexts: abusive relationships, extremist movements, even unhealthy jobs or friendships. We adapt gradually, normalizing what would have shocked us initially. The lesson: regularly step back and assess. What would your past self think of your current situation? Are you moving toward the person you want to be, or away from it? Lesson 3. Certainty is seductive and dangerous. Heaven's Gate members had absolute certainty. No doubts, no questions, no need for evidence. That certainty was comforting. It eliminated anxiety about life's ambiguities, but certainty is dangerous. The most destructive movements, political, religious, ideological, are characterized by absolute conviction. Humility, doubt, and openness to being wrong are signs of wisdom, not weakness. The lesson? Be suspicious of anyone who claims absolute truth with no room for doubt. Reality is complex. Certainty is usually a red flag. Lesson 4. Ideas have consequences. Heaven's Gate's theology led directly to their deaths. Beliefs matter. What we think shapes how we act. This applies to all beliefs, not just religious ones. Political ideologies, economic theories, social movements, all can have real-world consequences. We should critically examine not just whether beliefs feel good or provide meaning, but where they lead. The lesson: trace your beliefs to their logical conclusions. If everyone believed and acted on this idea, what would happen? Would the world be better or worse? Lesson 5. Love isn't enough, but it matters. Many Heaven's Gate members joined seeking love, acceptance, and community. They found it. But that love was conditional on conformity and obedience. It was weaponized to keep people in line. Healthy love allows freedom. It celebrates individual growth. It doesn't demand you abandon everyone else who loves you. It doesn't require you to become someone else entirely. The lesson: real love expands your world. False love shrinks it. Lesson 6. We're all vulnerable. Perhaps the most important lesson: every one of us is susceptible to manipulation under the right circumstances. Intelligence, education, and mental health don't protect you. What makes people vulnerable? Life transitions, trauma, isolation, loss of meaning. Everyone experiences these at some point. During vulnerable moments, the promise of answers, community, and purpose is incredibly powerful. The lesson: practice humility. Don't think, "I could never fall for that." Instead, understand the mechanisms of influence and stay vigilant. Support people during vulnerable times so they don't need to seek dangerous communities. The search for meaning. At its core, Heaven's Gate was about the oldest human questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Is there more to existence than this? These aren't crazy questions. They're human questions. Every culture, every era, every person grapples with them. Religion, philosophy, science, art. These are all attempts to answer or cope with these fundamental mysteries. The tragedy of Heaven's Gate isn't that its members asked these questions. It's that they found answers that led to death rather than life. Humans need meaning. Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote that people can endure almost any suffering if they have meaning. Conversely, people with every material comfort can feel empty without purpose. Heaven's Gate members found meaning. They believed they were part of something cosmic, eternal, and important. They had purpose, direction, and hope. That's not nothing. In fact, that's everything. It's what makes life worth living. The question isn't whether we should seek meaning, but where we find it and whether it leads toward flourishing or destruction. Healthy meaning-making includes connections that enrich rather than isolate, beliefs that promote life and growth communities with accountability and transparency, purpose that serves something beyond self-interest, hope that motivates action without denying reality, certainty balanced with humility and openness. Heaven's Gate had some of these elements, but twisted them. Members had connection, but it isolated them. They had purpose, but it glorified death. They had hope, but it required leaving Earth behind. There's no single right answer to life's big questions. Different people find meaning in different places: family, creativity, service, spirituality, science, nature, relationships, work. What matters is that our meaning-making systems are tested against reality, remain open to correction, and lead us toward connection rather than isolation, toward life rather than death. What if someone you love is involved in a group you think is dangerous? How do you help them without pushing them away? First, stay connected. The biggest mistake families make is cutting off contact in anger or frustration. This plays into the group's narrative that outsiders don't understand, that family is trying to hold the person back from their true purpose. Keep communication lines open. Express love unconditionally. Even if your loved one doesn't respond much, knowing you're there matters. Second, ask questions, don't lecture. Telling someone their beliefs are crazy or they're brainwashed rarely works. It puts them on the defensive and strengthens their bond to the group. Instead, ask curious questions. What do you like about this group? How do you see your future? What would it take for you to consider leaving? Don't argue with answers, just listen and ask follow-ups. This serves two purposes. It keeps dialogue open, and it might help the person think critically without feeling attacked. Third, understand the psychology. People join groups because they get something from them: community, purpose, answers, love. Attacking the group means attacking something your loved one values deeply. Try to understand what need the group fulfills. Then think about how to address that need in healthier ways. If they're lonely, can you help them find connection? If they're searching for meaning, can you support that search while offering alternatives? Fourth, avoid deprogramming or forceful intervention. Old school deprogramming, kidnapping someone and forcing them to reject their beliefs, doesn't work and often backfires. It can traumatize the person and strengthen their commitment. Modern cult experts recommend strategic interaction approach, staying connected, planting seeds of doubt gently, and being there when the person is ready to question or leave. Fifth, seek professional help. Organizations like the International Cultic Studies Association, ICSA, and family support groups can provide guidance. Therapists who specialize in cult recovery can work with families. You don't have to navigate this alone. Sixth, be patient. Leaving a high-control group is a process, not a moment. Your loved one has to grieve the loss of their community, identity, and worldview. They have to rebuild a life. This takes time. Some people leave quickly when something triggers doubt. Others take years. Some never leave. You can't control the outcome, only your presence and support. Seventh, take care of yourself. Having a loved one in a destructive group is traumatic. You need support too. Join support groups for families. See a therapist. Don't sacrifice your own mental health. You can't help them if you're drowning yourself. The wider context. Heaven's Gate wasn't the first mass death by a religious group, and it wasn't the last. In 1978, Jim Jones led over 900 members of the People's Temple to death in Jonestown, Guyana. Most died by drinking poison flavor aid, not Kool-Aid, despite the phrase. Unlike Heaven's Gate, many Jonestown victims were murdered, forced to drink poison, or shot trying to escape. Children were killed. It was a massacre, not a mass suicide. In 1993, the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, burned during an FBI siege. 76 people died, including 25 children. This was partly forced by circumstances, the siege, but members chose to stay despite opportunities to leave. Between 1994 and 1997, the Order of the Solar Temple saw multiple murder-suicides in Switzerland, France, and Canada. 74 people died. In 2000, hundreds of members of the movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God died in Uganda, possibly murdered, possibly suicides. Today we see different manifestations of the same dynamics: mass shooters radicalized online, extremist movements convincing members that violence is necessary or noble, QAnon followers who've abandoned families and careers for beliefs most would consider delusional. The forms change, but the patterns remain. Charismatic leadership, absolute certainty, apocalyptic thinking, isolation from outside perspectives, gradual escalation of commitment. Not all new religious movements or tight-knit communities are dangerous. What separates healthy groups from destructive ones? Research identifies several key factors. Authoritarian leadership structure. Destructive groups have leaders whose word is law, with no accountability or transparency. Deception in recruitment. Healthy groups are upfront about beliefs and expectations. Destructive ones reveal information gradually. Isolation from outside perspectives. Cutting off family. Controlling information, discouraging critical thinking. Us versus them mentality. Viewing outsiders as dangerous, evil, or ignorant. Ends justify means ethics. Anything is acceptable if it serves the group's mission. Exploitation. Leaders benefit financially, sexually, or through power while members sacrifice. Heaven's Gate had most of these. Do had absolute authority. They isolated from family and outside information. They divided humanity into enlightened students and humans still planted in the garden. Du himself practiced the group's celibacy rules, distinguishing him from many cult leaders who exploit followers sexually. But the financial and psychological control was absolute. The role of technology. Heaven's Gate was one of the first religious groups to effectively use the internet for recruitment and message distribution. This was 1996. Most people barely knew what the internet was, but Heaven's Gate recognized its potential. In some ways, they were ahead of their time. Today, virtually every movement, religious, political, social, uses the internet to find followers and spread messages. The internet is a powerful tool for connection. It lets isolated people find communities. It democratizes information. It gives voice to marginalized groups. But it also creates echo chambers where beliefs become reinforced and radicalized. It allows misinformation to spread faster than truth. It lets destructive groups reach vulnerable people worldwide. Social media algorithms optimize for engagement, not truth or well-being. Content that triggers strong emotions, fear, anger, excitement, gets promoted. Conspiracy theories and extreme content often perform better than nuanced truth. This creates radicalization's pipelines. Someone watches one video, the algorithm recommends increasingly extreme content, and gradually their worldview shifts. Modern extremist groups understand this. They create engaging content, use memes and humor, meet people where they are, emotionally, then gradually introduce more extreme ideas. It's the same gradual commitment technique Heaven's Gate used, but faster and reaching millions instead of hundreds. Technology isn't inherently good or bad. It's a tool. The same internet that spreads conspiracy theories also spreads knowledge. The same platforms that radicalize also connect support groups, educational resources, and people finding healthy communities. The lesson from Heaven's Gate isn't that the internet is dangerous, but that we need to understand how it shapes us. We need digital literacy, critical thinking, and awareness of how algorithms influence our beliefs, remembering the individuals. Before we conclude, let's remember some of the individuals who died in Rancho Santa Fe. Not as cult members, not as statistics, but as people. Susan Strom, 44 years old, had been a nurse before joining Heaven's Gate. She was known for her compassion and her desire to help others. In her final video, she said she finally found what she'd been searching for her entire life. Robert Bittner, 41, was a talented computer programmer. His higher source work was excellent, professional, creative, reliable. Clients praised him without knowing his other life. Alfonso Foster, 44, was one of the few African-American members. He'd struggled with finding purpose after leaving the military. Heaven's Gate gave him structure, mission, and belonging. Margaret Joyce Bull, 72, was the oldest member. She'd been searching for spiritual truth for decades before meeting Tayan Do. She'd finally found answers she could believe in. Yvonne McCurdy Hill, 38, left behind 2 young children when she joined. Her family spent years trying to reach her. In her final video, she expressed no regret about leaving her children, fully convinced she was going somewhere better. Each person had a story. Each made choices that seem incomprehensible to outsiders, but made sense within their worldview. Each was someone's child, someone's friend, someone's loved one. It's easy to dismiss them as crazy or weak. It's harder, but more important to see them as human, people searching for meaning, who found themselves in circumstances that led to tragedy. The tragedy of Heaven's Gate isn't just that 39 people died. It's that 39 people lived lives where dying seemed like the best option, where leaving Earth felt like victory rather than loss, where saying goodbye to everything and everyone seemed like a reasonable choice. That's the real horror, not the physical act, but the psychological and social journey that made it possible. Final reflections. We began this journey with a comet and a mansion. We've explored belief, belonging, manipulation, and meaning. We've asked uncomfortable questions about faith, freedom, and the nature of reality. So what's the answer? How do we make sense of Heaven's Gate? Visual, thoughtful imagery. There's no simple answer. Heaven's Gate happened because of a perfect storm of factors. Charismatic leadership, vulnerable individuals, isolation, gradual commitment, apocalyptic beliefs, and a worldview that valued death over life. But underneath all that, it's a story about the human condition. We all search for meaning. We all need belonging. We all want to believe we're part of something greater than ourselves. We all hope there's more to existence than what we can see and touch. These aren't weaknesses. They're what make us human. The question isn't whether we should search for meaning, but how we search and where we look. Visual, healthy community, connection, life. Healthy meaning-making. Connects us to life, not death. Expands our relationships, not narrows them. Encourages questions, not just answers. Promotes growth, not stagnation. Serves love, not fear. Embraces mystery, not false certainty. Heaven's Gate promised certainty, purpose, and transcendence. But the price was everything. Identity, relationships, critical thinking, and ultimately life itself. Today, the mansion in Rancho Santa Fe looks like any other wealthy home. New owners have tried to move past its history, but the memories remain. 39 people died there, believing they were going somewhere better. Were they deluded? By most definitions, yes. Were they mentally ill? Most weren't by clinical standards. Were they manipulated? Absolutely. But were they also genuine believers making what they thought was a rational choice? Also, yes. That's the complexity. That's the challenge. That's what makes Heaven's Gate so disturbing and so important to understand. Today, millions of people are searching for meaning in an increasingly fragmented world. Some will find it in healthy places. Family, service, creativity, spirituality grounded in life. Others will find it in destructive places. Extremist movements, conspiracy communities, groups that promise certainty at the cost of freedom. The factors that created Heaven's Gate haven't disappeared. In many ways, they've intensified. Isolation, information overload, anxiety about the future, longing for community and purpose. These are defining features of modern life. But we also have advantages the Heaven's Gate members didn't have. We understand manipulation tactics better. We have resources for cult awareness and recovery. We can recognize warning signs. We can choose communities wisely. We can build meaningful lives without abandoning critical thinking. The lesson of Heaven's Gate isn't that searching for meaning is dangerous. It's that we need to search wisely, with eyes open, with connections maintained, with humility about what we know and don't know. The irony of Heaven's Gate is that its members were so focused on reaching the stars that they forgot to value the ground beneath their feet. They sought transcendence so desperately that they sacrificed the human experience, messy, complicated, painful, beautiful, and absolutely irreplaceable. Whatever lies beyond this life, if anything, we can't know with certainty. What we do know is that we're here now, in these bodies, on this planet, with each other. That's not a prison to escape. That's the miracle. Visual, final montage of life. Humanity, connection. 39 people died believing they needed to leave their humanity behind to reach something greater. The tragedy is that their humanity was the greatest thing they had. In March 1997, millions of people looked up at the Hale-Bopp comet. Most saw beauty, wonder, a reminder of how vast the universe is and how small we are. 39 people looked up and saw a doorway, a way out, a way up. They saw hope in leaving rather than staying, in dying rather than living, in the stars rather than Earth. They were wrong. But understanding how intelligent, thoughtful people could reach that conclusion, that's the challenge Heaven's Gate leaves us. We're all searching. We're all trying to make sense of existence. We're all building meaning from the materials available to us. The question is, will we build something that enriches life or escapes it? Will we find communities that expand our humanity or diminish it? Will we hold our beliefs with humility or certainty? Will we stay connected to reality and other people or drift into isolated belief systems? Heaven's Gate believed the stars held salvation. They were looking in the wrong direction. Salvation, meaning, and purpose aren't out there in the cosmos. They're here in how we treat each other, in what we build together, in how we live the only life we know we have. 39 people died looking up. Let's honor their memory by looking around, at each other, at this world, at this life, and finding meaning in being fully, messily, beautifully human. Heaven's Gate, a journey to the stars, in memory of those who died. March 1997. May their story help us choose life. Thanks for watching Dreaded Documentary. Please subscribe for more.